pues para los que no le conozcáis, bueno, es un honor, la verdad, tenerle dando un webinar hoy para el Comité de Automática. Fernando de la Torre, bueno, es uno de los mayores expertos en visión artificial, en visión y en muchos, todo lo relacionado también con, yo creo, aprendizaje automático. Se doctoró en Ingeniería Electrónica por la Universidad Ramon Llull de Barcelona en el año 2002. Es también ingeniero de telecomunicaciones, que lo obtuvo en 1994, y tiene un máster en Ingeniería Electrónica en el 96 por la misma universidad. Después de obtener su doctorado, realizó estancias postdoctorales y de visita en la Brown University, en Providence, Estados Unidos, y en el Gatsby Computational Neuroscience Unit en Londres. Desde 2005 es miembro de la Facultad de Investigación del Instituto de Robótica de la Universidad Carnegie Mellon en Pittsburgh. En 2014 fundó Faciometrics LLC para ofrecer tecnología de análisis de imágenes faciales, la cual fue adquirida por Facebook en 2016. Su equipo de Facebook, o Meta, desarrolló las principales técnicas de visión por ordenador, por ejemplo, seguimiento facial, detección de manos, coloración del pelo, eliminación del fondo, para efectos de realidad aumentada móvil, para Messenger, Instagram, Facebook y Portal. Estos algoritmos son utilizados por más de un tercio de la población mundial en todo momento. Vamos, que le tenéis a los algoritmos de Fernando, están detrás de la mayoría de vuestros teléfonos. También contribuyó al algoritmo central detrás del seguimiento facial en MetaQuest Pro. Después de su etapa en Facebook o Meta, regresó a Carnegie Mellon, donde actualmente dirige el laboratorio Human Sensing Lab del Robotics Institute. Sus intereses de investigación se centran en los campos de la visión por ordenador y el aprendizaje automático, y en particular las aplicaciones a la salud humana, realidad aumentada, realidad virtual y métodos que se centran en datos, no solo en el modelo. Bueno, pues le vamos a dejar ya presentar. Sí que os agradecería que vamos a poner todos el micrófono en apagado mientras él realiza la presentación. Muchas gracias, Fernando.
Bueno, Jaime, también buenas tardes a todos, y muchas gracias, Jaime, por esta invitación y esta presentación. Me hace mucha ilusión aquí. Mi padre es originalmente Canalejas de Peñafiel, en Valladolid, y siempre tengo muy buenos recuerdos de haber pasado grandes veranos allí, en las peñas que hacíamos. Bueno, yo lo que voy a hacer es también voy a cambiar al inglés, porque mucha terminología, ya intenté dar una charla en español y la terminología no me sale igualmente fluida. Pero bueno, espero que todo el mundo más o menos me entienda. Yo lidero un poquito el Human Sensing Laboratory here, and today I want to talk about a couple of things. The work that we do in the Human Sensing Laboratory, where we apply this technology to a couple of applications. The first one is in the area of medical monitoring and diagnosis, and the second one is in the area of augmented reality and virtual reality. And then, if I have time, I will discuss some work on some new topic that I started when I came from industry. I had a startup, got acquired by Meta. I spent 4 years in industry, and while I was developing products there, what I realized is that around 70 or 80% of the bottlenecks when you develop the real products comes from the data. Not necessarily the algorithm, but the data, how to label data, which images to label, how to correct data. And the issue here is data is error prone, time consuming, and is not sexy. Nobody wants to work on data. So when I came back and spending so much time on the data, I decided that I want to spend some time developing algorithms to gamify the data experience. So try to make it fun to work with data. And this is the data focused computer vision part, if we have time. But also during the talk, feel free to stop me if you have questions, and I'll be happy to follow. Let me start the first part with the human sensing for medical diagnosis. So I started this human sensing laboratory around 20 years ago. with the goal of trying to model subtle human behavior. And this was inspired mostly from the work on John Gottman. John Gottman is a social psychologist from the University of Washington. And since the 80s, he has invited more than 3,000 couples to his lab. And his lab is called the Love Lab. He invites the couples to the lab and asks the couple to start a conversation about a point of disagreement. For instance, one likes the dog, the other doesn't like the dog. And then he records these interviews and then analyzes these interviews. And after, 45 minutes analyzing, after analyzing a 45 minutes interview, he's able to predict with around more than 90% accuracy if this couple is going to get divorced or not in 15 years from now. And you might wonder, how does John Gottman? And this is better than chance, and that's the interesting thing. How does John Gottman knows just by observing this interaction how they resolve conflicts if this couple is going to get divorced or not in 15 years from now? So what he does, he looks at the video and tries to encode every conceivable emotion that the couple shows in what he calls a specific affect coding. This specific affect coding has 5 positive emotions like joy, validation, humor, and 15 negative emotions like contempt, criticism, stonewalling. And then he encodes all these emotions and then lens mapping to this label if the couple is going to get divorced or not in 15 years from now. And there is clearly a relationship, between the emotions and the label, which in this case is going to be 15 years. If you're going to get divorced in 15 years from now, and there is this relation that he discovered, and this relation is again much better than chance. So there is a signal there is a subtle signal. So, but to do something like what John Gottman was doing, it requires someone with the expertise of John Gottman to figure out what to encode. And then there is a lot of manual label to try to go through a video and encode every possible emotion. No? And the other thing is you give these videos to do different coders and they are going to encode different things. So there is a lot of variability. It's not just this time consuming, you need expertise, and it comes with variability. So my dream always has been, if we can develop algorithms that can learn this subtle behavior, but just from data. You give me the videos, you give me the labels, I'm going to discover this in an unsupervised way. No? And by the way, those of you who are in a relationship, there are 2 tips that John Gottman says for your marriage to survive. The first one is you have to show 5 times more positive emotion than negative emotion. And the second thing is you never show contempt to your partner. These are the 2 things. Now, to do projects like that in the a few years ago, we developed a method for depression assessment. Imagine that I'm depressed, I'm going to an interview with a clinician, and the clinician typically asks me, there is a structured interview, and they ask me several questions like, did you sleep well today? Do you have suicidal thoughts? They ask a battery of questions, and at the end of the day, they rank your depressed state. 1 of the gold standards is the Hamilton score. 0, you are not depressed. 100, you are very depressed. But this Hamilton score depends on what you tell the clinician and the expertise of the clinician, and not on how you behave. So what we wanted to do is to develop an algorithm that can provide behavioral measures of depression. For that, we record the interview between the clinician and the patient. We record the audio and the video. And with all algorithms, we were able to predict with around 70% of accuracy if the patient was depressed or not. And this is only from audiovisual information. No? When people are depressed, for instance, they have more gaze aversion. They don't make that many eye contact. They don't have an honest smile. When you have an honest smile, you smile with the eyes, and they tend to dump the smile. So these are features that we were able to recover, from algorithms like this. So we develop algorithms that, given a video, we are able to encode the facial expression of this person in the video. So the question is, how do we encode facial expression? We use what is called facial action coding system. This was proposed by Ekman in the 70s, and he basically says that any facial expression worldwide could be represented, by a combination of 44 action units. Each action unit is related to one or more facial muscles. For instance, action unit 2 is outer brow raiser. Action unit 5 is upper lid raiser, or action unit 23 is lip tightener. So there is 44 action units, and we have systems like this that in real time, they detect the face, and they decouple what is rigid and non-rigid motion, and this is important, because what happens is the motion of the face, I have the rigid motion, and then I have the non-rigid motion, which is the movement of my lips or my eyes, which is what I want to recover. And then we build classifiers, one we normalize in 3D, this face, we can recognize action units, like this is Takeo Kanade, and now, for instance, I think he's gonna smile, and you will see the action unit 12 is gonna pop up. Now he's gonna smile, and we are able, for instance, recognize the smile here. Now the challenging here is we need to recognize these subtle facial expressions. The pressure is subtle, it's not exaggerated. And in this case, for instance, you have to decouple very well the rigid and non-rigid motion. And so this was one of the challenges. Then this technology also we apply in the problem of driver distraction detection. We had a camera, and in this case, an infrared camera, sitting in the dashboard of the car, and we were able to detect where the driver is looking. Here you can see in the image. And if the driver was looking off the road for more than a few seconds, then we had we provide an alarm to the driver. And this technology, or an extension of that, actually was also licensed from General Motors, and it's going to be in the cars sometime soon. Another problem that we have worked is in the other problem of Parkinson monitors. As more than 1 million Americans, mostly order of 65, they live with Parkinson's, and there is no cure for Parkinson. There is medication to have to reduce the symptoms. The problem with Parkinson is they meet with the doctor every 3 to 6 months for self-reporting symptoms. Of different motor, and they do an evaluation of different motor tasks. But we have the same problem as with depression. Self-report measures tend to be inaccurate because every 6 months you don't remember many things. The motor tasks that they do when they go to do the evaluation, they are highly variable and depends on the last medication intake or the time on the day. And then the other problem is clinical visits typically are infrequent and inconvenient. So what we would like to have a system that can monitor 24/7, not every 6 months, the evolution of the Parkinson patterns. So what we did, we put inertial measurement units, in the patients, and we provided them an app and say, whenever you have Parkinson symptom, please log in the time on the app. The problem with that is the data is very noisy. And then, for instance, these are tremor effects. And then during the day, when you are moving, you are doing other different daily activity, and you don't have this kind of tremor effects. So the algorithms here, given this inertial measurement data, should automatically segment when you have tremor or not tremor. And what happens is, the patients, many times, they start and they end the tremor symptoms, but they are not well localized in time. So we have algorithms, given this stream of data and a weak label that tells me something around here, there has been a tremor, we were able to localize the start and the end of these tremor effects. And then we build what is called person-specific classifiers. And then we are able to provide monitoring 24/7 over 6 months of the symptoms that the patient had in Parkinson. And this is very useful, for instance, for treatment effects. We give you a particular medication, and you can figure out if you have more or less tremors. And then in which times during the day, probably more when the medication wears off. Other thing that we are very interested in is in monitoring the well-being of elderly parents. By 2030, it's estimated that all baby boomers, including myself, will be older than 65. And in fact, for instance, my parents are getting older. I'm originally from Barcelona. And my parents are getting older, and I would love to have a system that can monitor the well-being of my parents in the home and try to detect any mental or physical decline. And since I've been working on computer vision, you think, you can put cameras. The problem is, especially, and also, in Europe, there is big privacy issues. And personally, I will not be comfortable having cameras at home monitoring my daily living. On the other hand, I want, in the case of my parents or myself, to be at home as long as possible. This gives you a much better sense of purpose. It can improve the sense and autonomy to control your life. And it's very important to have social connection and family. And that's also something that Spanish society is particularly good at that, no? Also, these have some special benefits. So I would like to monitor the daily activities, but, I don't want cameras, and leaders and riders might be expensive. So one of the things that we did here is try to explore is if with the Wi-Fi signal that we have at home, can we detect people? The Wi-Fi signal that we typically think as a signal for transmitting information actually is also a signal that can have information, about people. What you are going to see here in this, in this image is the dense pose detection that we got only from Wi-Fi signal. We were able to detect these people from the Wi-Fi signal. No images are used for that. So how do we do that? So we have, in this case, we have this scenario. We have 3 emitters here and 3 receivers here. This is from a standard router that you can have at home. Usually in the routers, you have both the emitter and the receiver in the same place. But in this case, we put the 3 emitters here and 3 receivers here. And then we have people walking around. And from the reflections of the Wi-Fi signal, we are able to predict, where the people are. Now, for that, we use what is called the channel state information, which is a complex matrix that records the amplitude and the phase of each of the subcarriers that we have in the Wi-Fi signal. But then try to mathematically model the Wi-Fi signal is extremely complicated. There are many factors that affect the signal, signal propagation and the reflection, like temperature, humidity, signal scatter, environment attenuation, So it's very hard to model it mathematically. So what we are going to do is to learn it from data. What we are going to have is we are going to have a camera. We are going to have this setup. We are going to put a camera, and we are going to have people walking back and forth. And then what we are going to use is the video to label the, because it's easier and we have algorithms that do very well, we are going to use the video to label the data. And then we have the video, we have the Wi-Fi signal. The video is used to provide ground truth. And then what we are going to do is we are going to use a network that is going to predict from the Wi-Fi signal, is going to predict this dense pose from the dense pose. Now, this network is learning in a supervised manner. And so the video gives me the supervision, and then just from the Wi-Fi signal that I'm going to input here, what I want to do is to predict the output, which is going to be this pose. Now, this architecture has two parts. One that we call modality translation network, and the input is the channel state information. In this case, the input is going to be a channel of 5 by 30 by 3 by 3. This 3 by 3 is because I have 3 emitters, 3 receivers. Then what I have is 30 subcarriers in the Wi-Fi signal. And then there is a factor 5 here, which is I record the Wi-Fi signal at 100 hertz, but the video at 20 hertz. So there is a 5 correction here. Now, basically, I input the Wi-Fi signal, I input the phase, I input the amplitude, and then I have an architecture which is an encoder-decoder. I flatten this structure, and I produce an image like. So from the reflections of the channel state information that has information about the attenuation of the amplitude and phase, I convert this to an image like. And then given this image like, I have an architecture, the same as dense pose with RCNNs. It's the same visual architecture, like this was going to be an image. And the output has to be this detected of the dense pose. So what I'm asking to the network is, hey, tell me from the reflections of the Wi-Fi signal, any part of the reflections of the Wi-Fi signal that can produce an image-like thing such that a computer vision detector can detect this dense pose. Right? And we try to capture in different type of scenarios. We put these 3 emitters and receiver in different, in 6 captures in lab, office, and tech captures in different classrooms. And this seems to work okay. I mean, of course, there is some false positives here, and sometimes it's not complete, but it's very robust to occlusion. Now, and it works surprisingly well, generalized surprisingly well to different clothing, different people, and different activity. However, it does not generalize well over Wi-Fi location, meaning this emitter and receiver, if we have it fixed, then, and we learn from this configuration, it works quite well and generalizes quite well. But when we change the emitter and receiver, that's the method is not that robust. Yes. Now, let me change a little bit to the kind of human sensing that we do in the context of augmented reality and virtual reality. During my lifetime, there has been kind of 3 revolutions in human computing. In the 80s, we have the introduction of the personal computers. In the 90s, we have the interconnectivity of these computers with the World Wide Web and the cloud. And in 2007, we had the introduction of the iPhone that allowed computing from everyone to everywhere. And we are in the verge of what is going to be the 4th revolution in human computing. And this is going to come likely with the hands of augmented reality and virtual reality, where we are able to, in augmented reality, we are able to mix the digital and the virtual world in some kind of display like augmented reality classes. There are few prototypes now. Many major companies like Meta and Google are working on that, and the technology is there. When I was in Meta, one of the R&D's work done in Meta, one of the very interesting applications for this technology is going to be the future of communication. Right now, for instance, I'm giving this talk through the internet, and I'm talking to a screen, but I cannot see your faces. I cannot have a feedback, of the slides that you are interested in or for the jokes that I'm doing. It's one-way communication. Now, what is likely to happen in the future or in the near future is we are going to have some kind of VR headset like this. This VR headset has cameras looking at your eyes and cameras looking at your mouth. And the idea here is from these cameras, I want to transfer my facial expression, my facial behavior to an avatar that looks like me and behaves like me. And this person here is going to look at this avatar in 3D. And this person like this is going to look at this avatar in 3D. And this is going to provide a much better sense of immersiveness. And let me show the video. And the key here is, again, from these cameras, we need to transfer subtle facial expression. And this is not an easy job. The way to do it, in this case, in the Pittsburgh Reality Labs laboratory, they have two capture systems, one for faces and hand capture that has kind of 160 cameras, all synchronized, microphones, and then they have the Sociopticon that does kind of body capture. We collect data like this. This is high resolution data. We have here 50 millimeter sensor. They capture kind of pore level details. You can see here how accurate the data is. And then with that, the first thing that we do is we take the data, we do photometric stereo to reconstruct the 3D. We do some key point detections. We fit a mesh, a 3D mesh that is common to everybody. And then we refine these key points and refine the mesh. So we try to align all the faces to a canonical mesh because we'll have to, in the future, we want to reconstruct or we want to build a generic model across faces, no? But in this case, what we have is for one person, these are person-specific models. We want to learn a joint representation of geometry and appearance. So here I have the mesh, I have my appearance, and I'm going to learn an autoencoder. In this case, it's a variational autoencoder. And what I'm gonna learn is a model, is a person-specific model that have an state, which is the expression, and another is the viewpoint. So with enough data of myself, I have a data capture, I do different expressions, I have my shape, I have my texture, and I build an autoencoder. From this autoencoder, the important part is going to be the decoder. And this decoder, I have an state, which is expression. I put different vectors, I have different expressions, and the viewpoint controls the rigid motion of my head. Viewpoint controls the rigid motion, the state controls the non-rigid motion, the expression. And now the question is, my ultimate goal is I'm going to have images like that, which they look at the eyes of the user and the mouth. And from that, I have to transfer all this facial expression to an avatar that looks like me and behaves like me. I have this decoder. I have an decoder that I learned from training data that shows my facial expression. Now, the problem is how do I find a mapping from these images that are partial? They are only partial views of the face. They are infrared. They have high radial distortions. How do I learn a mapping from here to here? If I know this mapping, I can always learn a regression. The problem is that there is no correspondence because I have my headset. I don't know what is the correspondence. I cannot reconstruct my 3D of my avatar because I don't know the correspondence. It's kind of an egg chicken problem. If I know the correspondence, I can learn a mapping. But I don't know the correspondence. The only thing I'm recording is this video. And with this video, because I'm occluded, I cannot see the correspondence. Now, the way we do that is in a weekly supervised manner. Remember, for every person, I'm going to know this decoder. And this decoder, I have two parameters. One is the expression, I put different vectors here and I reconstruct different expression, and the viewpoint. This is the non-rigid, the rigid transformations. I can rotate, translate in 2D or 3D my head. Now, this decoder is known. I learned it from person-specific data. And then what I have is I have this head-mounted camera display data. So I input this data. I know this decoder, and what I want to do is I want to learn an encoder, and this is learn, such that produce parameters that generate a decoder when I generate an image, a 3D avatar, and when I project these 3 avatars in the viewpoint of the headset, I can reconstruct this image, basically. Tell me, I'm trying to learn, tell me which is the encoder such that produce, and this decoder is not that produce a 3D avatar, that when I project these 3 avatars in the viewpoint of the camera, I can reconstruct these images. Now, here we have a problem because my avatar is in RGB, and I can project this in the camera viewpoints of the internal cameras of the VR headset. But then I need a domain transfer because the cameras and the images I'm recording here are infrared images. So I need a network that is going to do domain transfer. And I can learn simultaneously, this encoder and this domain transfer. And this is what the algorithm kind of does. You have a video that you record, and then what you do is you have a video, you have the person-specific model, and then you align these 2 modalities. This is the infrared modality with the RGB modality of the avatar. Now, with these things, we already have a correspondence between the infrared images and my avatar. And I could learn a regression there. But the problem with this method is here, the only thing we're doing is learning a person-specific model. And one of the things that I would like to do is learning a generic model. Basically, I put my VR headset and I can transfer the expressions quickly to an avatar. And that's what we did. One of the things that we did is we applied this kind of, for every person that we have the VR headset, and we have the correspondence with the avatar, with the method I explained before, and we are going to apply now this to several people. What we want to do is learning a generic encoder, an encoder that for any person tries to extract what is the facial expression and marginalize everything that is not facial expression, meaning anything about the facial appearance, anything about the background. So this is a generic, facial expression encoder. And this we try for different people. And the interesting thing here is with this universal facial expression encoder, we are able to align facial expression in this embedded space. In this case, you can see that this VR headset, with this VR headset, we can drive different people, and we have expressions that are very, very accurate. And this shows that we are able to align subtle facial expression in this embedded space. Yeah, how I'm doing with time? I think. Yeah, so I can show you many things here, many different things. Let me move a little bit faster so we have more time for interesting questions. So we apply this also in the case of the body. We have a camera looking downwards, and then from this egocentric view, what we want to do is, from this egocentric view, how can you predict body pose estimation? The main challenge in this project was that there is no data sets. So there are several challenges. The first one is you have a strong perspective distortions because these are, wide field of view or wide field of view cameras. and they are very close to the face. You have self-occlusions. Many times you don't see your body. There is always a natural ambiguity when I want to go from 2D to 3D. The 2D is a nonlinear projection of 3D. When we try to recover 3D, there is always ambiguities. It's many-to-one mapping. And the problem I was mentioning before is we don't have public data sets for this kind of view. We have a lot of data sets for human body pose estimation with regular views, frontal views, but not with this kind of egocentric views. So what we did is we rely on synthetic data set. We created a new synthetic data set that has around 400 frames, 23 males, 23 females, and yeah, we train on this synthetic data set and surprisingly work pretty well on realistic data. And the architecture had a couple of interesting components. We have the image. So this is basically a regression problem that we are trying to solve. We are trying to regress from the egocentric view images to the body joints of an skeleton, 3D body joints. And the two things that we do is we go from the image to the heat maps, and then from the heat maps to 3D. And we break this into these architectures for a couple of reasons. The first one is that we have a lot of data in 2D for heat maps. So we can pre-train these two pose estimator with other algorithms that can estimate 2D key points from images. And then it's very easy to generate synthetic data from 2D to 3D. This is one of the breaks. And the other interesting thing, what we did here is multitask learning. This network that tries to predict the pose, the X, Y, and Z position of the body joints, but also at the same time tries to predict the rotations. And there is a relation between the 3D pose angles and the rotation. So we are trying to predict these two items, which are related, not the same, but they are related, and they share a backbone here. And also, the other thing that we try to do is a network that has information to predict the heat maps. This bottleneck that is shared across these three representations provides a lot of robustness when it comes to be able to generalize to real images. And not surprisingly, this method works pretty well. It was state of the art when we published. And then, you can see that just trying to predict 3D, we get this error. When we predict 3D plus the rotation, we lower. If we predict the heat maps, we lower. And if we predict the heat maps and rotation, the angles are even lower. Now, as I mentioned before, when I first moved to Meta, my team was developed this mobile augmented reality technology. We developed techniques like putting doggy faces or mask faces into people's faces, and this was released in Instagram, in Messenger. I always joke that I spent kind of 20 years of my life, and the biggest achievement was putting doggy faces in real time in a mobile phone. But definitely that was the application among all the things that my mother saw most utility. Also, this kind of technology for human sensing was applied to kind of segmentation problems like background blurring, virtual hair color, virtual makeup, neck coloring. And this was very timely because this was released during the time of the pandemic, when people were a little bit afraid to go to big retail shops to do purchases. And you were able to try glasses or try virtual hair coloring or virtual makeup in your phone. No. One of the things that I learned from my past from industry, in particular when I was in the production, is, it's very different, of course, as you know, to do a paper than to do a product. And when you have to do a product, robustness and speed has to work. For instance, all these algorithms have to work in an back in time in an iPhone 7, which is was relatively easy to do. But it also had to work on this phone, which is a Motorola E second generation, which is an Android from 2013, and it was very hard to make all this work in a CPU in Android. And Android in general is very hard to support because have different, many different hardwares, many different operative systems, and it's really hard to develop for Android. But the other thing, the other three problems that took most of my time was data, and data. As I did not mention much, but when I was doing this project, for instance, of depression and Wi-Fi, the big effort there was not the algorithms, was collected the data. We spent more time collecting the data than developing the algorithm. The other problem when we work in human behavior is not only collect large amounts of data, but how do we label data? Data, like in the case of depression, when you want to assess different depression levels, you rely on self-report measures or you rely on a clinician. But if you give this data to different clinicians, they are going to rank different. And when you use self-report measures, are not necessarily very accurate, Or in the case of Parkinson, what I was mentioning, we give the Parkinson patients an app and we tell them, tell me with the Parkinson start and end. Well, they tell you approximately, but it's not an accurate measurement where the tremor starts and ends. And many of them actually, they forgot to do it and they have tremors. There is a lot of missing data. So these are unsolved problems in human behavior. Now, another problem is how do you choose a representative test set? For instance, when I was developing for Meta, we ship these products to 3 billion people. The real test is 3 billion people, but we learn from 200, 300,000 samples. So how do you select 200, 300,000 samples that are going to be representative of 3 billion test sets? And one of the major problems is, well, if your algorithm does not work for a subpopulation, then probably I will get in trouble. And the question is, how can you guarantee, these things? Because in machine learning, you build your training set, you build your test set, you assume that the test set is representative of your real test scenario, but this is not necessarily true, and there is no guarantees of that. So how do we evaluate better computer vision algorithms? And the reality is that what I said before, to build a product, 70 or 80% of your time goes into collecting data, labeling data, curating data. And I will say that data is arguably the most important component on any learning-based vision system. And we know it's the most critical component, but it's just not sexy work. If they tell you to do a data collection on labeling data, you're always going to have better ideas of what to do with your time. And the question when I came back from industry is, the problem I was trying to think is how can we develop algorithms that can help us to create better data sets, remove biases? How do we evaluate computer vision algorithms better? And given the time, I'm not going to go through it, but I'm going to give you, for instance, a sample of just one problem that we recently are excited about, and it's how can we evaluate the performance of deep learning vision systems. Right now, what we do is we build a test set and label the test set. The problem with that is, as I mentioned before, there's no guarantee of robustness or fairness, since there can be a mismatch between the real test distribution and my testing set distribution. Imagine in faces, I want to build kind of a glass detector, and then, the other problem that we are going to have is very hard to have a balanced test set, a balanced training and test set. So when I want to train, let's say, an eyeglass classifier, how can I guarantee that I have bases, of eyeglasses across different gender, ethnicity, age, long hair, short hair, beard, no beard. So it's kind of exponential to have a uniform sampling across all these attributes. So it's just not practical to collect. So it's very hard to build training and test it. So the idea here is, well, can we evaluate, can we debug a computer vision system without a test set? And the key idea is that, yes, we are gonna try to evaluate that, but since we don't have a test set, what we are gonna use instead is generative models. We have pre-trained generative models that can generate tons of images. And these have been trained on billions of images. So they are gonna be being able to be a much more powerful tool to create test sets, because they have seen so many images, to creating test sets to debug my computer vision. And what we are going to do is getting the generative models, and we are going to distill them for the task of model debugging. And the high level idea is, we have these generative models, imagining the face. With these generative models, I can automatically find directions in these generative models, that corresponds to attributes. For instance, for the case of face, I'm going to have a generative model that changes glasses, another generative model that changes long hair, short hair, another axis of the generative model that is going to change like age or gender or ethnicity. And then what I'm going to do is, I have a parameterized generative model that I can change attributes. And then I'm going to do what is called adversarial attacks. I'm going to say, hey, I have an AGAS classifier. Tell me which of these attributes generate images in this generative space, such as I change one of these attributes makes my classifier fail. I do kind of semantic adversarial attacks. I give you a classifier, eyeglasses. You have to generate images that don't have eyeglasses, and the classifier thinks that has eyeglasses. Find me all these images automatically using the generative. And we have ways of doing that. And then, since I have only 10 minutes and I prefer to leave for questions, let me just finalize a little bit. Actually, this is not the summary. I just want to probably, a little bit take-home message of actually, I stop here. Let me, 1 second. How do I do this? Yes, as a take-home message, just a couple of things. I think AR/VR is going to be the fourth paradigm shift in human computing. Many exciting things are happening there. Humans are important in the context of AR/VR, and we are trying to develop these human sensing capabilities for augmented reality, virtual reality, and also in the context of medical monitoring. And also the second take-home message is, in these learning-based systems, data is key. We did not spend enough time developing algorithms to improve labeling, to debug computer vision algorithms, and I think there is a good space to that. And I want to thank, some of this work was done while I was at Facebook Reality Labs, others at CMU, and these are some of the collaborators, and I want to thank. And I want to thank everybody.